All right, welcome everybody back into another episode of the Big Douglas Show. We appreciate you watching and listening. Make sure that you subscribe so you never miss anything. Today, to take a quick look ahead and a little look behind, two of my favorites doing it. My man Disco, how are you, sir?
Doing good, man. Hey, everybody. Doing great.
And of course, the great Adam Aniba is with us today. Adam, appreciate you making a little time for us during the holidays.
Happy holidays, guys.
How is uh how is everybody's how long does the Christmas tree stay up, Disco, after the 25th? Serious
So,
questions, things people need to know.
yeah, man. It's funny, man. My wife, she loves Christmas, so it'll be up probably until just before, but until just before Martin Luther King Day.
My mom some years ago quit worrying about it at all. And so now she has like an Easter tree. You know
Oh,
what I
man.
mean? And like a Valentine's tree, whatever little thing she's got to put on there, it just stays up and never comes down. Adam, there is a trend of multiple trees in the house. Are you guys a multiple tree family?
Well, my girls get like little mini ones to put in their room from their grandmother, but for the most part, yeah, just one main tree. It's about in the
And
heart,
Adam, you're up in New York, right? Is that
yeah,
right?
upstate. Yeah.
And how did you? I know I've asked you before, but how did you end up being such a Skins and Commanders fan?
Well, I grew up in the DMV. I went to high school and college, most of my college in Silver Spring. Met my wife. She was a teacher in Washington, D.C. She was from New York. So we moved up here. I've lived New York, near New York City, moved to Florida for 7 years, and then came back here about 8 years ago, moved up to the country just to get away from all the hustle and bustle. So
Right on. Disco, before we got started, you were telling me you recently got an award. Tell us about it.
Yeah, man. I'm a principal in Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and I was voted Principal of the Year in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. So now I'll represent the county in the next round for the Washington Post Principal of the Year. So pleased for that.
It's always amazing to me how many we have a lot of people in the education system that do the podcast or just heavy on Twitter and love
Mhm.
the commander. So I'm always glad to get some of the I don't know behind the scenes isn't right, but non football related stuff. We spend so much of our time talking football,
Mhm.
and we'll do it again right now. So I asked you guys before we got started. Uh, Obviously, we're going to take a look ahead at the game. That's what we do on Fridays. But before we do that, it is obviously the end of the year. So let's take a quick look back at maybe some things that surprised you, some things that didn't surprise you that you thought maybe would surprise you. So I'll start. I was certainly surprised that we did not get better play this year out of the offensive line. I think that to me is the biggest quarterback. I mean, I don't know. I obviously thought be doing Carson all year long. I think we would have. We can get to this a little bit later. I think people forget Carson didn't get benched. He got injured. So I don't think the plan was to have removed him from his duties at the moment. But I still think offensive line was how they had planned on hanging their hat this year. Injuries and a couple of other things kind of derailed that. And then one of my good notes, man, even with injuries, the secondary has been fantastic. And I did not see, I had been told to look out for the emergence of Forrest this year, that they were happy on him and thought he was a sneaky good draft pick, and that he just needed some time to get acclimated to the game. So that's kind of where I'm at. I was a little surprised and disappointed by the O line this year, surprised and excited in a good way about the secondary, which I really didn't expect much out of. Disco, let's get to you next on two surprises, one good and one not so good.
So, one surprise is I didn't realize that the defense, I mean, after seeing it, the first few weeks, I didn't realize the defense was going to be that good, particularly after we didn't really aggressively address the linebacker position in free agency. So I was really surprised at the defense and also surprised at how a lot of the young guys have young players on the defense have really stepped up. I mean, most of them are young guys, but like you mentioned, like Derek Forrest and Benjamin St. Juste, who I think could be one of the top corners in this league very soon. So I was really surprised at that. I was also surprised at how the season has gone as far as the offense. I tweeted this in the at the beginning of the season. I said, God help us if the offense sucks. Because this was initially, when the defense wasn't playing well. And that's the last unit that I thought would be struggling. But again, I think it comes down to quarterback play, which they still, some would argue still haven't solved. So quarterback play and the defense.
It's interesting. And Adam, of course, we'll get to you in a second here, but it's funny how that worked, right? Because I think before the season started, not many people had the same expectation for the defense simply because it hadn't played up to expectation the last year or so, maybe half a year. And they started putting weapons together on offense. They put together what I think they thought and what a lot of us thought was going to be a really good offensive line. And all of a sudden they were going to hang their hat on offense this year. We were going to see this offense that was going to be capable of putting up 30 points. They got a quarterback that was going to, quote unquote, unlock the offense. And it was another 180. It was so surprising that instead it was the defense that after, I guess, about 4 games, it took them to get rolling. And maybe that was because Cam Curl finally came back, which I think is a story all by itself. But again, this team reverted back to being what Ron, I think, always wanted anyway, which was let's play great defense and pound the rock. So it's been interesting. We've guessed wrong, I think, twice in a row on who we thought they were going to hang their hat on. Adam, let's get to you on some of the things you've noticed so far in the season.
A little outside the box. I'm surprised how the NFC East is doing, to be honest with you. I thought if this ever happened, I thought, there's no chance Washington would be in it. But the fact that you have all 4 teams right now that are all still alive, that's a big surprise. I would say the defensive line production, although I did have high hopes for them, not this kind of sack total. I did not see this coming from Allen and Payne. I think I was one of those ones that thought, they're not going to commit to Payne. This is going to be, his last season here. Now it's totally different. I think you have to reshape a lot of your cap going into the offseason, trying to keep this, defensive line together. Because right now, make no mistake, this is the strength. I'm a little surprised with the defensive backs we have that they haven't given up more points, because I think we saw in years past, a lot more splash plays. And for the most part through the season, they've limited a lot of that. It's been more about, late in the games when they're losing, they just, couldn't stop the dam from flowing here, especially with the Giants when they just, at the end of the game, I thought that was our strength, that we could just really stop the run. So I think at times I was a little more surprised of how teams have been approaching. We saw with Atlanta, I think they kind of set a blueprint of, doing these double, triple teams into our interior guys and just opening up, huge holes. So that's been a little bit surprising me, the inconsistency. But, I have to, not that I had high hopes from Scott Turner, I just didn't think he would be this bad situational, because I think we can point to at least 2 or 3 games where a couple of calls, here and there in the red zone could mean a difference for 2 or 3 more wins. So I think that's been a big surprise how bad he is as a situational play caller. You can see his scheme, it works, that there's definitely some elements to it that, he's able to scheme receivers open, but his situational awareness is just nothing like what his father was. Not that I'm holding his father to a pedestal, but he's just not there. I really don't. Personally, I think that, a guy like KOC, if we were somehow able to, get him to rise the ranks, I think that guy would have been ideal for, even with the type of quarterbacks that we have, because the offensive line, like you mentioned, has just been a big disappointment. But if you look at Ron Rivera's track record, go back to Carolina, he hasn't put a huge emphasis on really building over his offensive lines. What I'm hoping is, no matter if this team is sold or not, I think this staff is probably back next year. And I really hope, going into the offseason, there's, I have offensive line and cornerback as, the 2 biggest needs. And of course, linebacker right below that. But I think that they really have to dedicate their resources to do that. It'll be interesting to see how the next 2 games play out, because I don't see any situation where you bring back Carson Wentz at his cap number. I think that there's, of course, restructuring, but I think he's another case of a retread that, it just didn't work out. So I think you cut your losses, see where you go. I hope the same with Taylor Heineke. I think that you can't move forward if you still have him in the rearview mirror. I think, although I love Sam Howell, he's a guy I evaluated coming to the draft. I think that we need to go younger at that position. And even if you go into the free agency market, bring in someone. I'm a fan of Jacoby Brissett. I watched him play in high school. I think that that's a serviceable veteran that you can get. But yeah, there's a lot of pieces that need to be, fixed with this team. But I'm pleasantly surprised where they are right now, because I did not think we'd be at this point, thinking about playoffs right now.
Just Chris, interesting. The fan base, I feel, is torn on Scott Turner. I'm personally torn on Scott Turner. I mean, it feels like so. I guess if we look at it this way, like an offensive scheme is a grouping of plays, right? Like I think people talk about scheme and they're like, oh, this and that. The scheme works. If you watch the games, I mean, guys are open, yards are there. This may be, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'd actually love to know this. Maybe they're the best team between the 25s. They march the 25s. The problem with Scott Turner is knowing when and which plays to call.
Right.
Where do you, Disco, stand on Scott Turner, not the play designer, the play caller? Because I think there's two big differences.
So I'm glad you asked that, because I've taken a lot of heat on Twitter. I'm a Scott Turner stan, and I'm gonna tell you why. Consistently, we bring in offensive coordinators and we give them mediocre quarterbacks. Every 2 to 3 years, what do we sit? Fire the offensive coordinator, get rid of him. He doesn't call. He's not a great play caller. In any line of work, you want to be put in the best position to succeed. Now, I'm not, and I agree in that Scott, one of his weak areas is he lacks sometimes feel for the game. But I watch offensive coordinators throughout the league call bonehead plays every week. And if you're a genius if it works, and you're a goat if it doesn't. So I'm not saying that Scott Turner is great or even very good, but I feel like I am not calling for his head until he gets a consistent NFL quarterback. And I think Ron has done him a disservice, to be honest with you. I mean, he has not shored up the offensive line, and you brought in a quarterback that you thought could be the answer and not giving him put him in the best position to succeed. So I'm not one of these guys. I mean, yeah, I get upset at some of Scott's play calls myself. Like, why would you call that? Why are you calling a run on 2nd and 9? I get that. But nah, I think my book is still out on Scott Turner, because we've seen it here time and time again. People doubted Kevin O'Connell. Now people are like, he was great. People cried about Kyle Shanahan because he wouldn't run the ball. And now people say he's great. We just eat up and chew through offensive coordinators, and we don't give them the weapons to succeed.
People are going to put a lot of the onus on the quarterback position, Adam. And fair enough. The position has not been good here since, dare I say, Kirk Cousins. People hate to hear that, but that's a fact. Okay. And I don't even think we can argue that anymore. I think the closest thing to Kirk Cousins, not in play style, but just in general arm talent, is the guy they have right now. Now, to the way I understand it, he has been in the same kind of system that is Wentz the entirety of his career. Got here, brand new system, brand new language, brand new way that the game is thought of. That's the other thing with scheme, is it's how do we get from A to B? What is the point? What is the plan? And this is different. We saw 6 games with a bad running game for Carson Wentz. The offensive line was still in shambles. Frankly, it's still in shambles, by the way, but in less shambles now. There's more of an identity. And dare we forget again, that defense was not playing well when Wentz was in there. So, again, Adam, I feel like we're in one of these chicken and the egg scenarios all the time, where it's like, whose fault is it? Where does the onus lie? I feel like it's kind of unfair to put it on Wentz when it didn't feel like they were at the same level that they were when Heineke was out there steering the ship. To that, you say what?
I'll say this, and again, I've been watching offensive coordinators for a long time, and I agree with the Disco saying there's a lot of bonehead plays, but I think when you have a lot of tells out there, he has a lot of tells with his personnel grouping. So when you see, De'Ami Brown, Cam Sims coming out, like 90% of the time, it's run. So although his scheme works, he's all over the place. But I will say this, even though this might seem like a reach to some people, I think there's a level of arrogance when you bring in somebody like Wentz, and at this point, you really try to redesign everything. I think we saw the same thing with Donovan McNabb. Although McNabb, again, he was on the down part of his career. I think if you're going to invest in a veteran like that, it's really arrogant to not really design your system around them. I'm not saying that Taylor Heineke should have had every RPO, this and that, but with him, there should have been a lot more opportunities to get him out of that pocket, knowing that you have an offensive line like that. But with Wentz from the beginning, I think running the ball and putting him in position with play action and doing what he feels comfortable with, I think that's how you get the best out of mediocre to lower tier quarterbacks. And I can't look away when I see it with Turner. I see it game in and game out that he truly believes that his scheme will work. And yes, it can. But like Disco said, you don't have those quarterbacks that are going to give you that kind of production right now. So when that happens, you really have to look back and you have to adjust a lot of things. You mentioned Kyle Shanahan. What he did with RG3, that wasn't something that he does all the time. So what he showed me that season is he was willing to adjust everything because that offensive line wasn't good that year either. But he realized with Alfred Morris, with RG3, and the type of speed at receivers he had, he could scheme them open constantly. The bottom line is when you have to know what you work with and you have to adjust. And I'm hoping in the last two games, and I think there's a good chance we might see it, that they'll run the ball until they can anymore. But everyone keeps talking about Cleveland, that they're one of the bottom tier as far as giving up runs, but, I think top 10 as far as, giving up the pass. So it will be really telling how he approaches this game with Wentz because Wentz, Myles Garrett, he's not going to get a lot of breathing with him because, fact is our tackles, they're just whiffing on everything. So it'll be really telling to me how they really scheme this team, knowing that they're going to give up a lot of, yards in the run game. But it's not just that. If they're able to do that, you got to work on a lot of the short game. Let's see some screens. Let's see some quick outs, because sometimes those can be as good as runs. But one thing we've seen with Wentz, he's always trying to play hero ball. So this game is more, a lot of people think, okay, now we're going to air it out, going to do great things with Wentz. I don't know. I think a lot of things have to go right. And I think that once again, the defense is going to have to put us in good position to, have a chance in this game.
Yeah, I actually don't see them doing a ton of like the airing out. I wonder if being able to sit for however many, the 5 games it was, 6 games that Wentz was out, maybe, I actually believe in the idea that watching how the offense was kind of guided by Heineke will help him to kind of get the understanding. The other thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough, Adam, with the way that, okay, so people say all the time, I wish they do more RPO with Heineke and get him out of the pocket. Well, my feeling is like they probably do want to do that. I'm not sure Heineke throws well on the run, and I certainly don't think that – I think a lot of people don't realize the artistry that is the RPO.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Heineke's very good at making the read. We've seen a couple of those where he holds that ball and takes off himself. Boom, gone, big pickup. I don't know if it's the in-game bonuses. I don't know if it's because they didn't have much left. But Heineke, Disco, hadn't been running the ball very much anyway. I also wonder if Turner just didn't think he was very good at throwing the ball on the run, or else I think they would have done it because as the casual fan and can see it and tells me all the time, why not run it? Which tells me if they're not running it, he doesn't feel like the quarterback can do it. No Antonio Gibson this week, Disco. Is it a problem?
I think it could be, but I think we're pretty deep at running back. I mean, I think every time seemingly that Jonathan Williams touches the ball, he makes he has a gain, and we've still got Patterson. So depends on if Brian Robinson is healthy. But to a point that you made about Heineke and the the RPO, I mean, let's face it. I think Scott Turner has taken Heineke as far as he can go. I mean, I don't think there's any juice left to squeeze with that. And I'm not anti Taylor Heineke. I'm very appreciative for what he does, and he actually put us in a position, to be able to make the playoffs. But he's limited. Anybody? I mean, I know you got there are people out here that he's limited. He can make your wild throws like Wentz. He can make some wild throws, and he can make some wild throws like, wow, why would you throw that? So yeah, but I think with the run game this week, I think Brian Robinson can carry the load, and Williams has been good in relief from what I've seen.
Adam, it's interesting. People tell me all the time, "Got to draft a quarterback this year. We got to draft a quarterback this year. We got to throw darts at the board." Right? I hear that all the time. Throw darts at the board. Well, as a guy that grinds the tape and studies the prospects and sees what happens each year, draft in and draft out, Adam, I hope you could tell the folks, you may not have the exact number on you, but the chances of hitting a quarterback after round one go down significantly. The chance of getting a quarterback that hits after the second round, not impossible, but not great. So again, I get confused when fans start saying, you just got to take a quarterback. You got to keep swinging. There's different ways to swing. Spending a third or a fourth round draft pick on a quarterback that's going to sit for a couple of years, to me, is not great allocations of assets. And this year in the first round, they certainly, I mean, who's going to trade with them, right? The guys picking in the top 5 for quarterback need quarterbacks. So I'm not sure. Again, to me, as crazy as it sounds, it feels like it's the same quarterback room again. Like what happens if they win both these games, get in the playoffs? You've got to bring Carson Wentz back, don't you?
Depends. I think Carson Wentz, we can't be talking about like a 200-something yard performance, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I think if he is really leading this team, they're scoring 24 to 30 points, I think definitely. But I think even if you bring him back and you're going to try to negotiate a reduced cap, they're against the wall with a lot of players. It's not just Daron Payne. It's, Montez Sweat. It's Cam Curl. Deals coming up. But I'm with you on the quarterback. This is not the year. I don't honestly, even if they were in the top 15, I'm not sold on these guys. I'm not sold on Stroud, Alabama kid. I'm not sold on Levis. I'm looking at guys from that 5th round up. But when you talk about it, these are developmental guys. I am a believer that you try to take a quarterback maybe every year, every other year, but not early because, like you said, they're going to sit. A big problem with this team over the years under the Snyder regime is they just do not develop quarterbacks. And a lot of that has to do with the owner getting involved because I truly believe anytime quarterback's in the discussion, he's in the room. I think Wentz, I understand Ron Rivera got all hot and bothered when people asked him. I truly believe Snyder was involved in that. I don't think he can resist. I think he's always pushing that. So until we have a situation where the owner is not getting involved, I don't know if the quarterback position is going to be solved. But I do like the idea of giving Hal an opportunity. I think that he's had a valuable experience this year by being a QB2 on game day and being active and seeing a lot of the things. So what I'd like to see is going into the offseason, not the job given to him. Like I said, just threw out a name, Jacoby Brissett, just because we're talking about a $6 million salary. Because even if you can somehow convince Taylor Heineke, because if you look at over the cap, they're throwing out numbers of $19 million, which I don't think anybody's going to pay him. I think it's more in the realm of that 10, 12, 13 million. I think that's absurd for Taylor Heineke because I think if you want to move forward as an offense and as a team, you don't bring back Taylor Heineke and Wentz unless you get to the playoffs and you get past round 1. So it's not just this 2 games. If Wentz can get you past this and past round 1 and he's still looking serviceable, yeah, I think you can maybe approach him for, a renegotiation, but it's got to be drastic. If you're still talking about that $20 million range, I think he's going to hamstring and we're going to lose valuable players. So I think you have to understand that you do have some valuable pieces at receiver on defense that you can really build off of. But again, I'd like to see him going this offseason. Sam Howell competes with QBX from, a guy from the street. I'm looking, I just put out a small schooler, Badgett, who led the nation, D2. I know a lot of people no guy has ever done anything, but I really liked his game. I think that's a guy you can develop. KJ Jefferson, Arkansas, he really showed the other night. I do believe that, having a dual threat option that can, do a lot of things, will give you a chance. But again, yeah, quarterback's tough. And I don't think this is the year that they really invest anywhere in the top 100, 150 in the quarterbacks. Next year, I'd go all in, because just the early look, the USC kid, kid from Washington, those are just two. There's a bunch of kids that are going to be coming out next year that I think that they should go all in for. But I think the way this team is built right now, I do believe that if you go into the offseason, really look at a guy like Sam Howell, what he did in UNC the last 2 years. He had all those weapons that, I think it was 2020. He lost everybody in 2021, became a dual threat. I think he is an ideal guy to really build off and then go into the offseason and bring in a veteran, see what he can do. But I don't think that, bringing back and trying to do more of the same is the best interest in them long term.
So can I jump in real quick, Doug?
Yes.
Yeah. So I agree 100%, Adam. I feel like if Wentz shows well of these last couple of games, I think you do try to bring him back. I think that I'd like. Here's the thing: if you get Andy Dalton production, Jacoby Brissett production, Geno Smith production, this is a playoff team.
Right. I agree.
Hands down.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need, it just, and I'm really not trying to jump on Taylor too bad, but just with more arm talent and more talent, you're going to win 3 more games. We could have won with Andy Dalton. We could have won with Mitch Trubisky. I mean, we could probably be 2 or 3 games better. So I agree with that, but I would really like to see Sam. You can't convince me that Sam Howell is worse than Taylor Heineke.
Right.
So I really like to see him and invest in him. And I think they're doing it the right way. Everybody's like, well, play Howell. That time has passed. Let the kid sit. We've got him under contract. Bring him and let him compete next year.
See, because you have the type of receivers that's the key here. Dotson, McLaurin, even Samuel, like obviously we've seen they can be good despite the quarterback play. Mm-hmm. So if you mentioned Dalton, Brissett, these guys will take the checkdowns. They'll take the short and intermediate hitch routes. These are the guys that will make plays after the catch. For some reason, Wentz won't do that. And Taylor Heineke, the thing with him is he just doesn't have the vision. Once he loses that first read, he's not even thinking of looking underneath for the most part. And honestly, it's not just him. That offensive line is not giving him a chance to really look at a second read. So again, like you said, we don't have to have a world beater or quarterback this coming year to really make some noise. I think you just continue to build this defense. Paramount, you fix that offensive line, because the patchwork that they've really done with this has been a detriment, and there's no argument. I know people love Leno out there. Great guy for the community. But when he came in here, I think fans should have known what they were getting with him.
Well, listen, Leno was good last year. This is a little bit of a regression this year. I don't know how much playing next to Norwell affects his game. The two of them, it seemed like he had a good rapport with what's his name from last year that ended up going to Miami and then coming back. Had a good year. I don't know why. That's right. I don't know why they wouldn't bring him.
I don't know what the story is on him. Yeah,
there has to be some more that we don't know.
To do that. That's right. And he was. But I will say this, Adam, and I really hadn't thought about Heineke in the rear view. I always assumed he'd just be back. Certainly not for the crazy numbers that I've seen that you were talking about, that 18, 19. That's ridiculous. Crazy. Nobody's going to pay that. I do think that they can get Wentz down to 18, 19 million. Yes. And for a middle of the pack quarterback, I mean, that's what we're paying these days, right? I mean, the good quarterbacks, you want Lamar Jackson, that's fine. He's going to cost you $40 million a year.
40 million, yeah.
Right? Like that's what's happening. You wanted, Aaron Rodgers here, that's fine. He costs you $45 million a year. So to say, 24 million is highway robbery, not really. I mean, that's kind of and that's why, to your point earlier, and I've been on record at this, I think the Heineke number is more around 11 a year. Seems realistic. Look at what some of the decent backup quarterbacks in the league have made, like the Chase Daniels of the year, getting 12 million a year, 10 million a year, as crazy as that sounds. So, but I like the notion, or at least find it interesting, this idea of Heineke kind of just lingering as a shadow in the background that kind of affects, we can always just go back to Heineke. Right. So like putting all your eggs in one basket. I do think that there is still a good opportunity for Wentz to show out Ian Rappaport, I think, was the one the other day that said, the weapons that Washington has will be attractive to aging veteran quarterbacks that hit the market that are looking to get a couple big splash, like the Tom Brady type splash. So to that point, though, Carson may still be the best of what's left. I think these last two games really will be quite interesting to see. And they have them under contract, right? So they can just bring them back without doing that. It's interesting. We talk about this all the time on this show, and other shows talk about it as well. It's you just can't do it. It's the Daron Payne situation, which I find so fascinating. Adam, I know you and I talked before the season started, and it was one of these, you just cannot allocate that much money and resources to the defensive tackle position. You can't do it, specifically since at that point they had drafted Phidarian Mathis in the second round. It made a whole lot of sense. Listen, Daron Payne, I have long said Daron Payne's ceiling is like Warren Sapp, and I stand by that. I still think he can get there, and he's pretty close this year. A lot of people have concerns about, is this the old payday year? Which is fair to say because there's a lot of history to show. The difference to me between Payne is, like, we drafted him when he was 20. He's 25 years old right now. Like, part of the reason I think that he's starting to get in his groove is because he's starting to finally fill into his body. He's starting to understand the game a little bit better. He gets it. The switch at D, I am not one of these that puts a whole lot of stock in the position coaches affecting the outcome. But boy, you talk about something that affected the season, man. They made that D-line coach change, and I don't know what was going on there, but it is remarkable the difference that we're getting. Disco, Adam, I'll let you finish up. You get last word on this topic, but Disco, I think I know, but where do you stand on Payne now?
It's tough, man. I think you got to try to work something out.
Just to throw this out there too, for just, he's going to want more than the $19 million that John Allen's getting.
Yeah.
I think it starts right. I think the tag for D lineman is that 19, 18 and a half, 19.
Yeah.
So I would assume that Payne would be looking in the 21 million range, I think is probably what a long-term deal requires.
Yeah. I actually, I like the Phidarian Mathis pick because it showed a little bit of foresight. And I'm not suggesting, we don't know what Phidarian Mathis, he got hurt on the first series, but at least it showed that they had some foresight to at least try to draft what they probably think could be a good replacement. I think you try to re-sign him. I think it wouldn't be a good look for them not to. I think the market for him is going to be through the roof.
I do too.
I think it's going to be through the roof. I think he'll get a chance to go to a team where he's the alpha. I don't know. I think they're going to really try. I don't know if they keep him, but then, again, and I'm not saying that, Payne is not great, but you can get D tackles. You can get D tackles. A lot of folks, like, oh, you drafted, Math is too high, this or that. Look, man, if the kid can play, then he can play. And if he plays well, it doesn't matter where you drafted him. But I think you, in good faith, you try to re-sign him. But if not, you have to use some draft capital to, add that to the shopping list for the draft.
Adam, if I told you could only have one of Montez Sweat or Daron Payne, you pick who?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Before the beginning of the season, it would have been a no-brainer. I would have said Sweat, but it's the interior, it's the cohesion right now, how Allen and Payne play off of each other. And you said, I think it's going to be 22 million plus. I think that not giving him that fifth-year option, that's going to piss him off a little bit. So I think his agent's going to say, we want to test the market, and we'll give you the last chance to match the offer. I think that's exactly how it's going to go. Other than small school, SEC is where I spend a lot of time evaluating. And Mathis, yes, he is good, but he is nowhere in the neighborhood of these two guys. I love the idea of them somehow having Payne and Allen and then Ridgeway and Mathis. Man, that's solid. Like we talk about how when we let Settle and Ioannidis get away, I think potentially this could be a better foursome than we ever had. And the idea of Sweat getting away, I do see a lot of options with the edge. You know, there are a lot of guys, and I guess it's putting a lot of stock in Chase Young of what he can do. If you're not as confident, then you have to find a way to get Sweat. But, you know, like I mentioned, the three guys, Sweat, Deron Payne, and Curl. I want Payne and Curl out of all those guys because I just think those are guys that have the potential to be all pro. I'm not sure Sweat can get there. He's really good. I loved him in the draft. So somehow when he slipped and they traded back in after that, you know, heart condition, you know, misdiagnosis, that was a steal for them. But you have to lock up that middle because, you know, defensive tackles traditionally over time, you're not talking about 80, 90% of snaps, but our guys are playing that. So
incredible.
Yeah,
you got to find a way.
And just to that point, Adam, I think you make a great point. And I always, you know, I don't, you know, a lot of people, you know, feel like players who, you know, sign elsewhere, like, oh my God, it was a big mistake. Look at him. I mean, you know, everybody thinks that everyone that leaves is going to be all pro. But I have a feeling about letting Sweat go, man. I feel like if he goes somewhere else, I just, you know, like when Brian Arakpo left, I didn't even feel like, okay, he had a half sack. I called him Brian Half Sackpo when in his last year. But I think Sweat is a guy that's like, we're gonna be like, damn,
yeah,
we let him go. But I understand your point. I mean, you can't keep everybody, but he's the one that I would be like, this kid, he's gonna really ball out somewhere else.
If Montez Sweat had the Deron Payne year, I think it'd be a no-brainer.
Easy.
But Payne has been so good and so disruptive, and I just keep waiting. I guess they're very similar because I have been waiting for Payne to do this for a couple of years, and I feel like I've been waiting for Sweat to get there. Now Sweat's got another year before we have to worry about. That's the one thing. Maybe Sweat in his contract year next year does the same thing. I'll say this, and this is no knock on Sweat. If Sweat had the same turnaround next year as Payne had this year, I'd be more concerned about it being the contract year production for Sweat.
Me too.
I know that's not fair to say, and I don't know him personally. It's just the vibe I get from him. I don't know. I can see him being the contract year. I just don't get those vibes from Payne.
See, with Payne, one thing it jumps out the screen at you. At Alabama, these guys aren't asked to do that. They're really just gap assignment, whatever.
Right,
but
correct.
His arsenal, his pass rushing move, you know, what him and Allen have really, you know, that chop block, you know, the punch, everything that they're doing. Again, like you said, the defensive line coach, I think, deserves a hell of a lot of credit for that. You know, contract year aside, I think that he's really teaching a lot of fundamentals that Mills just wasn't, because Mills was limited. You know, but I think that, you know, it's a tough situation when you need a quarterback, but you want to bring back all these, you know, high end defensive line guys. So especially if you're running a lot of 5-man front, which they're doing. So it's a little different than a lot of teams. You know, these are the guys that are playing a lot of your snaps. So it's going to be a hard situation. But, you know, again, the franchise tag, I'm telling you, it's not out of the question. But that's, you know, that's a death sentence we've seen as Washington fans. So that's the last thing we want to see happen with Payne.
It feels like those usually are death sentences. The only nice thing about the franchise tag is that it would allow you to trade him.
Yes.
Because what I don't want to see is Payne walk out the door for a comp pick. Like a third round 2 years for now for Payne, again, would be gross mismanagement and negligence of what you're supposed to be doing here. It would, you know, harken back to Trent Williams, which we won't talk about because
he'll be in demand. Payne will be in high demand because everyone's, you know, they're hoping that he'll be the next, you know, LA Ram defensive tackle. You know, they're really, because you're seeing, you know, some flashes of that. I'm not saying you're putting him in there yet, but I think there will be teams that will be willing to give up possibly multiple first rounds for him. So Washington will be in the driver's seat with this. The question is, do you have faith in this pro scouting department, Mayhew and all these guys to really either sign him or get the best value for him? It's got to be one or the other. They can't be a Brandon Shreff kind of situation where we get a 3rd round comp pick. That cannot happen.
Right. You know, a guy that and I've been thinking about this for the last few weeks. I would actually try to shop De'Ami Brown. Yes. I think he's underutilized. And I think that there's probably a trade. I mean, Green Bay could probably use him. I think there's a trade market for De'Ami Brown. I think he's a kid. He's a asset that I think that they could have, because he's severely underutilized. And I think they should try to shop him and get a pick for him.
Yes,
sure. I have heard recently that, as we look into next year a little bit and where this team needs to focus its attention on, offensive line comes up, cornerback comes up, which I think maybe is the biggest need outside of O-line, and tight end. I'm not sure I agree with tight end. I do think that it would be beneficial, at least financially, cut ties with Logan Thomas.
Yes.
He has maybe next year fully healthy. Maybe he's just not fully healthy this year, but he looks slow and he looks behind. And so I would move on, but I actually like the three that they have. I think Bates is criminally underrated as a blocking tight end. I think his hands are better than people give him credit for. He just doesn't get a lot of balls tossed his way. And then the two other tight ends have been hurt, and we really haven't been able to see where they're at. Where do you guys see the biggest need heading into next year?
I think it's unquestioned is cornerback, because that's a premium position, and we just happen to be going into a draft that is extremely deep at cornerback. I've talked about the kid from PSU. We all know about Ringo. We know about the kid from Oregon. We keep going, Illinois. It's extremely deep. But I think when you get into that second round, mid part of second round, where Washington will be picking, the drop off is significant. But I think that second round, that is a sweet spot for left tackle, offensive line, interior line. So to me, you'll see a lot of my evaluations come out. I really am steadfast that I want to see cornerback in the first round, O-line, linebacker in that second round pick, because these positions can really have a quick turnaround. Unlike a lot of positions, I think Sauce Gardner showed you that, he's actually performing better than I thought he was, that a true long-limbed, athletic, fast cornerback can change things dramatically for your defense. And I think our defense right now, that is the biggest thing that they're missing.
Absolutely. And, I think, I don't know, man, we need 2 guards, 2 centers, a tackle, another corner, linebacker.
It's incredible how the centers have just gone down. I mean, how many can you go through in 2 years?
Yeah. I mean, you need
that story with Royer.
And, going back to what Jay Gruden said, man, when your center goes down, he said that's what keeps you up at night, because they call the protections. And you can see, when Larson went out, Royer went out. I mean, Thibodeau's coming off the edge unblocked. So, I would love another corner. I think they need to continue to layer. I think they need to continue to layer the defense. Like, again, I'm never going to be mad at drafting another D tackle. I'm not going to be mad at, O-line. They need a total rebuild of that line. But I've heard that, I've heard that Chris Paul is a kid that has a huge upside. So I've heard a lot of great things about him.
Yeah, love him.
I'm surprised they haven't tried to get him a little bit more action, particularly since they have obviously no problem rotating starting linemen, which I have never seen before in my life. Also, the amount of right tackle rotating they've done recently with Cosme and Lucas, I just never seen it before. Let's kind of wrap up this way. Disco, if Ron came up to you and said, "Hey, what's the game plan? We got to get this win on Sunday," what would you tell them are the keys to victory?
I think establishing the run game, but take what the defense gives you. I think, we all say run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Well, if the defense gets paid too, if they're stopping the run game, which Cleveland is allowing 4 some yards a carry, which shows they can't stop the run game. I just don't like, be a little innovative, let's throw it on first down sometimes, so I do want to maybe throw to set up the run. So that's what I'm thinking.
I thought they were going to do that from the very beginning. I really thought, and maybe that still is. I mean, that is his dad's original plan, right? Was to throw to set up the run. I still think they want to do that here. They just can't. And I think they tried that early on, to your point, and then realized, man, this is not We're not set up to do that right now. Let's get back to a ground and pound game. Adam, what do you think the score ends up looking like?
Yeah, I think we're probably looking at like a 23-17 kind of game. I do think that Cleveland has the run game to give us fits all day too. You have their receivers that are notable, but I think between Chubb and the other kid, I think it'll be tricky. But just like Disco said, yes, be a little innovative. A lot of the underneath stuff, I think, will really force the defense to be a little honest, because I think the blueprint is out on them, stack the line against them. But will they do that with Carson Wentz? Because now you have a guy that actually can see over the offensive line, can see over the pressure. But Wentz has not been a guy that's really been taking his checkdowns and taking them as they come. So that's my concern. Has he shown some maturity this late in his career? Because I think if he can do that, you have, we talk about Terry McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel, as good as they are as deep threats, man, get them the ball in space, 5-yard passes. Those are the guys who can take it to the house. That's what I want to see. I want to see a lot more screens, sticks, short stuff that's really just going to open up the field. And once you can start to do that, we talked about, Robinson, but like I said, Williams, Patterson, these are guys that are bowling balls that they're going to get you those, yards up the middle. So that's what I'm looking for. But again, if we can't force any turnovers on Cleveland, I don't think they'll have much of an opportunity to take this one.
Just go. What is your score prediction?
I've got Commanders 23, Cleveland 16.
I think that's about right. It'd be nice to see him go out and put up 27. They just haven't showed us that there's any reason to believe that they will do that. Before we run out of here, fellas, what are your thoughts real quickly on tomorrow's games? Who do you like? So we got TCU, Michigan tomorrow, and then the late game, Ohio State, Georgia.
I've got Michigan and Georgia.
I think the TCU Michigan game is going to be really interesting, because I don't think Michigan has faced an offense or a team like TCU. So I'm picking the upset with TCU in that one, but Georgia, of course.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows I'm a huge Georgia fan, so I obviously am picking Georgia. I think it will be interesting. The offense and the defense match up really good for that late game, and then it will be interesting to see, because the quarterbacks from our two favorite teams are so similar. I will be Adam. Do you think he gets drafted? Not Taylor Heineke, but of course I've lost him now. But the quarterback for Georgia, Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, no, I do. I do. I think that, he's on that fringe of that, potential, early day 3, if he really shows out during the combine and, the offseason stuff. Yeah, I definitely think he will. And, same with the TCU.
Heineke a little bit faster, I think.
I like his decision making a lot more than Heineke, though. That's the thing. And he's played against top level competition. So I do think he's actually going to be a pretty good pro. I'm not sure he's going to be a franchise guy, but I do think he's going to be a good pro.
Well, I felt it was interesting when I was looking back at all the shows this year, I had realized that you guys hadn't been on during the season, and that is my fault. So I'm glad that we were able to correct that and get you guys on before the new year. As you know, I respect you guys greatly and your knowledge of the game. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing it with our listeners.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. Thanks, Adam, man. Appreciate it.
Be safe, fellas, and enjoy the new year.
Happy New Year, guys.
As always. Thanks, guys.